Okay. Okay, Baltimore City Council Budget and Appropriations Committee, we're here for Council Bill 19-0386, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020. I'm Eric Costello from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. To my left is Councilman Leon Pinkett from the 7th District, Vice Chair of the committee. To my far right, Councilman Bill Henry, 4th District, member of the committee. To his left, Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District, member of the committee. To my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. We have Jeff Amoros representing Mayor Jack Young, Kimberly Rubens representing Council President Brandon Scott. These hearings are televised, so please be sure to speak into the microphone. With that, first up we have Department of Finance, Bureau of Budget and Management Research. Mr. Seneme, please take it away.
Good morning and thank you. My name is Bob Seneme. I'm the budget director for the city and here to kick off the hearings today with our service, which is Service 708, Operating Budget Management. So for fiscal 20, the budget for this service is $2 million. Our office overall, of course, is responsible for the development and presentation of the operating side of the budget. We're also responsible for monitoring the budget, revenues, expenditures, of course, once we get into the fiscal year. We also handle special projects, special research projects, and the 10-year financial plan as well. So in terms of changes in our budget for this fiscal year, for fiscal 20, there are a couple of positional changes that I just wanted to explain. Our office is up by two positions overall, and there's 4 changes. First, we had a administrative support person who supports our office that was on contract, on a staffing contract through last year. She's going to be on a full-time city position this year. Same is true of our IT support person. He was on an IT contract. He is going to be on a city position this year. So both of those actions actually are a small net savings to the city. We were paying less to have them on city positions than we were to contractors, and adds a little bit of stability to our office. There was also 2 transfers. We had one position that has been moved to another part of finance, to the billing integrity unit, and then we have a transfer in of a position from the mayor's office to manage the innovation fund. So net 2, which was those 2 adjustments, and then the other 2 are net neutral, the transfer out and transfer in. In terms of our performance measures, wanted to highlight our goal on citizen engagement. So we have a goal this year to engage 3,000 people through the budget planning process, 3,000 citizens. We're doing that in a variety of ways. We're having community events in neighborhood districts, including some of the folks here today. We've had events in the council folks' districts. We had a Reddit Ask Me Anything session, which is a way to get folks engaged in the process online. And of course, we have our Taxpayers Night that we have each year where we engage citizens before they make comments on the budget. We have a pop-up session where they can ask questions about the budget. So our goal this year is to get to 3,000 people. Also wanted to mention, not on here, but our long-term planning team, our revenue and long-term planning team is working on a refresh of the city's 10-year financial plan. So that will include a revised forecast from fiscal 21 through fiscal 30, a refresh of savings options that the city has, and also a deeper analysis of our tax credits. We also have the support of that vendor for any ad hoc analysis that comes up if there's deeper investigation we want to do on any other issues. So we'll be, of course, sharing that information as it becomes more developed. We're still in the early stages of that, but I would expect that sometime during fiscal 20, we'll have more to report on our long-term forecast and savings options, which we'll report back to both the mayor and the council when we have that available. So that's our plan for this year. That's our budget, and of course, happy to take any questions from council members.
Thanks, Bob. I have a question about the recent IT outage, cybersecurity issues.
Sure.
Our email service went out on May 6th, I believe.
7th or something, yeah.
When is the first time that you heard from the CIO of the city regarding the shutdown after that happened?
The first time that I met with him was actually for our budget planning sessions. So that was probably at least a week and a half after that. event, but it was a meeting specifically for the fiscal 20 budget, so we didn't hear from him directly. Our folks were going to cabinet meetings and getting information. Each department was represented, but we didn't hear directly from him.
And was he at those cabinet meetings?
I don't know. I wasn't at the cabinet meetings. I don't know offhand.
Is there anyone from your staff, Daniel or Pedro, who can answer that?
I don't think our representative was Joanna in the director's office. She was the one going to those meetings.
Okay. All right, I'll save that question for her. Thank you. Councilman Pinkett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good morning, Bob. The question I had was related to one of the outcomes, or the outcome for Service 708, related to annual money or annual dollars saved from BBMR recommendations. And so in 2018, the target is $2 million, actual $1.2 million. For fiscal 2019, the target is $2 million.
Right.
Can you tell me what those recommendations are?
Sure. So we have set a target of money saved from work that our analysts do, and we've set a generic target of $2 million, which we think is reasonable. And our test to whether it counts or not is whether it made it into the budget. So we want to do analysis that actually leads to actions that make changes in the budget. So the one that we did the analysis, the 1.2 million you're referring to, that was from last year. That was our staff had done analysis on the fire EMS fees, and those were implemented in the fiscal 19 budget. So it got us a little more than $1 million. Going back to the other one that's listed there from fiscal 15, as listed as $8 million, that was the circulator report that our office had did. And that one, it did make it into the budget. There was a recommendation to raise a parking tax and also to do some efficiencies on the circulator routes. It was made it into the fiscal 15 budget. It ended up not being implemented. But the work from that was shared with the mayor at the time. She had agreed with it and put it in the budget. So that's our criteria to test whether it counts as an actual.
So was the recommendation related to the fire EMS, was that the only recommendation that you all made for that? For the
no, there are many others. During the development process, the planning process, when we're meeting with the mayor and staff, we bring to them a variety of recommendations. Not all of them, actually lately very few of them have made it into the budget, just because fiscally we've been in pretty good shape and we haven't had to make any reductions. Part of what we're doing with the 10-year plan is we're taking all of those options, all that analysis that we've done, and we want to just kind of document it and solidify it, as well as looking at other options and just make sure we have a menu of things that we think the city can do to save money, some of which are harder than others. But we bring a bunch of recommendations to the mayor during our planning process.
So I just want to be clear. So you said that some of the maybe the recommendations weren't, for lack of a better term, prioritized because we're in a good place.
Sure.
So the need, I don't understand that thinking.
I'm sorry?
I don't understand the thinking that just because we have a surplus doesn't mean that we shouldn't still be aggressive as it relates to.
Yeah, I mean, we agree, which is why we bring those all options that we think are reasonable to the mayor, but ultimately it's up to the mayor and their team to decide what gets put into the budget.
Do you know what the dollar amount was for the recommendations, the savings that you?
I don't know offhand, but I could share with you an example of one of the memos we send that we brief them on with a bunch of savings options. We could send something like that portion of the memo to you.
And is the $2 million target, is that based upon what you think could be, is realistic as far as what will be accepted, or, I mean, what would be, if the administration, if the city was more open to recommendations related to savings, what would be your real goal as far as the city moving toward? Because $2 million is like not much,
right?
And so I just can't imagine that your real target would be $2 million worth of savings.
Yeah, the $2 million was based on what we think was reasonable that would be accepted. I personally believe, and one things we saw in the prior 10-year plan and what you'll see again is that the city could always spend more money on capital, and we could do more on, you know, certain programs that get discussed in certainly in this body, and tax reduction as well. We have a very high tax burden, so any additional savings option that we had, we could direct to either new, what we would see as effective programs, or additional capital spending, or additional tax reduction. So that's why we bring those options every period and say, if we're willing to do this action, we can do more of other things that the city wants to do. So, but the $2 million is based on just what we think is reasonable, what will be expected based on our experience the last couple of years.
Are those recommendations ever presented to the council?
So, I mean, the ones that make it into the budget, of course, are brought to the council.
Right, I'm talking about the,
But the ones that are discussed internally, if they don't make it into the budget, no, we've never briefed the council on all those collectively.
and, I mean, is there any reason why you wouldn't present those to the council as well?
Just because what we bring is what's in the budget, but what I'd like to do is, again, with the development of the 10-year plan, is have a menu of everything that we have done, all the ideas that have come up over the past decade, really, and kind of collectively have all those documented. We'd be happy to brief the council or present that to the council when it's ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think well, obviously we can't advocate for what we don't know. And if there are reasonable, recommendations that are being made, I think it's to the benefit of the city and for us being stewards of the finances and revenues of the city, for us to know.
Yep.
So that, either we can agree with the administration that maybe this isn't the time, or maybe we can push and say, this is something we really should be considering.
Yeah, when we're ready, I anticipate that will be sometime in fiscal 20 that we'll have, the research done with our consultants combined with all of the research we've done into one spot, and I would love to brief the council on those.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We've also been joined by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District, member of the committee, Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, and Councilman Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee. Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to grab the very end of the Vice Chair's comments and ask more specifically, would there be a reason why budget could not brief the Council's Budget and Appropriations Committee earlier in the budget year with the options that are being presented to the mayor in regards to, these are your choices of, this is additional capital you could spend, this is additional operational you could spend, this is additional tax savings, understanding that then the mayor is going to go make a decision of what goes in the actual Board of Estimates version that will come to us. But could we be briefed earlier at the same time that, we're just before or just after the mayor receives that same list?
Yes, I think we should do that. Our practice the last 2 years has been that we have briefed individual council members, if you remember, kind of in the
Right.
December, January timeframe, just about the CLS outlook.
Right.
At that time, we're starting to generate, and we have an idea of what we'll be presenting of savings options. Now, at that point, we haven't met with the mayor yet to get into the specifics of what will and will not go into the budget, but we could certainly, on that session, either individually or to the council as a whole, just say, here are the things that we're thinking about, here's what's in front of us.
I was just thinking that at that point, there's probably a quarterly budget hearing around then that this information could be presented at. But the specific question that I had intended to ask was the IT person that you've had contractually that's going to become a permanent position. Does that IT person report to BBMR or do they report to BSIT?
Reports to BBMR.
Okay, and I'm not sure if this is a question for you. Technically, this would be a question for BSIT, but you're in a unique position to see the city hiring patterns from a 30,000-foot view. Do most of the IT people in agencies report to the agency as opposed to reporting to BSIT?
Most of the agency positions do report somewhere up through the agency, and then obviously the positions in MOIT report up through the director. I can tell you internally there's been a lot of discussions back and forth, actually spanning many years, not just even in light of what's happened recently about having IT centralized versus decentralized. I can tell you my opinion. I think having kind of the core services like security and email support and things like that centrally in Moit makes sense because they're kind of, and just kind of the ad hoc support, of course, with computer issues makes sense to have under Moit. I think that the folks that are in the agencies likes to have somebody that they have at their disposal to kind of meet the needs of what they need for their operations. But I do think it would make sense if they had some kind of either dotted line or decentralized reporting up through up through BSIT, just to make sure that we're doing things consistently across all agencies. I mean, one thing you hear about constantly is that we're inconsistent about how agencies manage their IT systems. So having some kind of either approval process centrally or dotted line relationship would probably make sense too.
The reason I was curious is hearing that your IT person technically is literally your IT person in terms of reporting upward through finance, whereas the city council has an IT person that is effectively a MOIT staff person embedded in the council who reports to MOIT but is physically here to do all of the services that you just described. And I'm wondering what would be the best way for the council to be part of the conversations that you've just described in terms of how do we manage the balance of centralization and decentralization for IT, because I don't feel like the council has really ever been a part of that larger conversation.
Right. I think that's a good question for BSIT. I'm sure they have a point of view. I mean, just as an example, the person who reports to us, we still obviously have to work with BSIT.
Sure.
For example, our budget system data was being housed in an old database. I think it was Oracle, actually. And they told us you've got to get on SQL because that's what everybody else uses. So we work with them to kind of transition. So they're doing that all the time, even with positions that are reporting up through the agency. So it's not like they're on an island there. They are working with BSIT.
But there has not been any, I'm trying to think of what would be the way to describe it, but there has not been any push from budget to say that rather than consolidate this staffing in one agency budget line, it would be better to spread it among all the different agencies by having each one have a certain number of IT people or budget. That's not like some overall strategy we're purposefully employing.
No, and
Okay.
we certainly have a stake in that, and we've given our guidance. And what I had said was kind of centralization for kind of core citywide services, and then, some level of decentralization for agency-specific systems, but with some kind of approval up through a central body.
Okay.
To make sure that we're consistent, that we're not doing development on an island, essentially. So that would be our point of view, and we've expressed that to BSIT and Mayor's office many times.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Thank you. Last year, I mentioned or asked if there was a way to create a master calendar for all the events, meetings that we have here. And I just wanted to know the status.
The master calendar, you're referring to city council events or?
City council meetings, yes, as well as other things that happen between the chamber and that city related.
I believe that the system that this city council uses has all the committee meetings and has all the central, like the Monday night meetings, I believe.
Yeah, we have
Just,
all of the committee meetings and council meetings are posted on the city council website and on the calendar.
I think some of the meetings, though, that happen here are not posted. So a lot of times, folks don't know. I'll show you an example. I'll come up and give you an example later. But-
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, all committee meetings are required to be posted on the BaltimoreCityCouncil.com website.
Okay. Okay. And then the other one, I think I asked about a translator to see if there was a way that we could have, since we have different at the public meeting, so just like we had taxpayers night, is there a way to have a translator at any of those meetings?
A translator in terms of language barriers?
Yes.
So that's actually interesting you mention that. We had a request this year that's in the budget. It's not much money, but it's in the mayor's office budget for translation services. It's managed through, I believe, the mayor's office of immigrant Affairs is the name of the office. And they have a service whereby folks that have language barriers that are trying to get information from city agencies, that it can be translated. I don't know about particular events or how extensive they're choosing to do that, but they do have a service that is available. I don't know if it would be available for an event like that, but we could get you the contact for that, who's running that particular program.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We've also been joined by Councilman Chris Burnett from the 8th District. Council Vice President Middleton.
Good morning.
Morning.
I don't know if you had talked about our rainy day fund, but how much is in our rainy day fund?
$139 million.
Would you consider what's going on now with our IT situation a extreme emergency? Has there been talks to go into that fund?
There was. The policy for the rainy day fund, the way it's written is it can only be used after the adoption of the budget. So for the IT example, that's of course after the adoption of last year's budget. It can only be used for an emergency that happens post-adoption if all other reasonable means have been used to balance the budget. That's the language in a nutshell what it says. So I think it does, this event would have qualified for use of the rainy day fund, but we were fortunate enough to have a little bit of remaining revenue surplus, like we talked at last week's third quarter briefing, that we chose to use to cover the event before we would dip into the rainy day fund. So if we have revenue surplus from that current year, we would use that first or make other cuts on the expenditure side mid-year to handle an emergency event. But if we did not have that, we could have used the rainy day fund.
Okay. Do we have any other type of casualty insurances for local governments?
Specifically for the IT, we did not, but our risk management office is looking into that now to see if it would be a good use of funds. And his name is Doug. Doug Kerr will be here today at the finance hearing later this afternoon.
Okay.
So he is. We were told he is looking into it, but we didn't have coverage last year.
So would you say we've never had coverage?
Not for IT-related risk. I don't believe we've
Interesting.
had coverage.
Okay.
But Doug is the expert. Doug Kerr is runs the Office of Risk Management. He's the expert on that.
Okay.
On that
Thank
function.
you.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to just take a quick second to expound or to support Councilwoman Steed's statement. I think sort of what she was getting at is it really accessibility issues, and I've heard those same concerns about the meetings being translated or bilingual, multilingual. The other thing, and I guess if we could get more information, Mr. Chair, on the translation services. This was actually an issue that I came upon in the legislation for human trafficking. There was a requirement to have it in Spanish. And I actually had to really do a whole bunch of research and track down an outside agency to do the translation services of the document that was a part of the implementation of the bill, because the agency themselves didn't have this kind of thing on hand. The housing department didn't really have that capacity, so we were reaching around to different agencies to see how we could get the required posting translated over. And so for me, I didn't know that the mayor's office had that, and if that's a service that could be open to the council when we do pass legislation that requires multiple, because our citizens, we have a very diverse city, and we should be trying to pass legislation that does meet the needs of those diverse sets of communities. But if we are even members of the council struggling to figure out how do we translate things over, that's sort of a problem, and that I think speaks to sort of the larger challenges that people have expressed about the just general welcoming nature of City Hall. And so I think the steps that we can take, and I think she raised a really good point, to make it a little bit easier for people who want to get engaged with city government to do so. So if we could just, I guess, learn a little bit more about those translation services in the budget and how it operates, that'd be helpful, Mr. Chair.
We'll get that followed, because there was an enhancement request from that office to beef up their translation service. They had something, but they're expanding it. But in terms of how it can be used, we can direct you to the right person in the mayor's office.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
I think as well as having a link with maybe the agenda so people know exactly what's going to be discussed. So maybe that will help, get everything together. If there was a link that we could tag onto the posted meetings to say, this is what we're discussing, and maybe heads up, they can tell us who's coming. I think that would be helpful.
We'll definitely direct you to I don't know how it works and the details of how it works, but we'll get you the right person in the mayor's office for what that would look like.
Okay,
Would that be to the link as well?
I think it would be the same group because they have a contract that does, the way I understand is they have a contract where they have translators that translate your information that have expertise in different languages. It's a contracted service, but in terms of the details, I'm not familiar with how it works. But we can set up a briefing or get you the information.
okay, so request number 1 is information from the administration on the cost of translation services for city council meetings and hearings. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's good. Councilwoman Sneed, that's good.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
The information from the administration on the cost of implementing translation services for city council meetings, hearings, agendas.
Yeah, links, yes. Yes.
What do you mean by links?
So there could be a link right next to it. So, hey, if the meeting is already posted, here's a link to what will be discussed at the meeting. I think that would be helpful for anyone who's coming in. So if we have hey, this is what this meeting is going to be discussing, here's an agenda, if we can get it out. I'm not sure that we can do that, but it would probably be helpful. So someone who's not English speaking, be like, oh, I would like to come to that. That's something I'm interested in.
Mr. Ambrose?
And sorry, Councilman, to clarify, we're talking about written translation for agendas, hearings, and things
Yeah.
ahead of time.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And if they want to come, to have someone there, I think if we can have someone there to participate.
So translation in person as well. Okay,
Yeah, if they know about it, if we can post it, yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Bob, can you talk a little bit about the FOP and fire, the pension decision that the judge ruled on, and what that means?
Sure. So this information, of course, is coming from us from the law department. What they told us was we won on the active employees. So the reforms that were done for active employees at that time, the legislation stands. They have to work for 25 years. Tiered COLA is all in place. We were told, the judge ruled that we lost on the retirees, that we breached the contract for the retirees, the folks that were vested at the time the change was made. But we were also told that that doesn't mean we have to revert to the old pension system, that we will just owe some amount of damages to the folks that were affected. And the calculation on how the damages will be calculated is still being discussed. And we were told there's a meeting sometime in June between the city and the union parties and the judge about how that will play out.
Okay, so we're at least a month out before we have any idea of...
Yeah, the meeting is sometime in June. I don't know the exact date, but I think we'll have more info there. Yeah, we might be about a month, even a little bit less than that. We should know by the end of the the end of the fiscal year where that is playing out. But that calculation, I think, will take some time.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman, while we're waiting, I should have also, I just want to make sure I introduce our staff too, because we didn't do that at the beginning. I know most of you know these folks, but Daniel Ramos, our Deputy Director, Pedro Ponte, our Director of Revenue and Long-Term Financial Planning, and Mira Green, who's our Operations Manager. And you'll see Daniel and Mira here occasionally too during the schedule this week to cover if I get pulled out for any other reason. So just want to make sure you guys know who those folks are.
Bob, what are we paying Ernst and Young for the development of the next iteration of the 10-year plan?
Total contract, I think it's 1.5, 1.2, right? Yeah, the total contract is 1.2 million.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, right. It's a three-year contract. There are 4 key parts to to the contract. First is a review of our 10-year forecast. Like I said, they'll be looking at now fiscal 21 through fiscal 30. That part they're already started on. Second will be a development, consolidation of all the savings options that we had discussed, kind of putting them all together, making sure we know what the potential savings is and what the barriers are, if there's either legislative barriers or contractual barriers, just so we know how difficult they are to implement. The third piece is the tax credit analysis. And the fourth, we have a space in the contract for any ad hoc analysis, any additional work that we choose to do. They've given us some ideas. We haven't set them off and running yet on that, but we do have some discretion to have them do deeper analysis on things that we can't handle.
Schleifer?
Yeah, how do we make proposals for what could be included in that?
That last
Yeah.
section.
Yeah.
So if folks have ideas, we'd certainly like to hear them. We had ideas that we share with them. I can give you an example. One that we've been working with them, they haven't been contracted yet to do this work, but potentially doing a building analysis. In other words, where are all of the city's facilities basically, and trying to figure out where we have potential overlap so that looking forward we can do more efficient development. My instinct is we're inefficient in our every agency likes to use their own buildings for what they want to do, but we might have some shared usage. That's a potential. So they have a unit in Ernst & Young that does kind of spatial analysis, how much space are we using, is it being used for the right purpose, and are there changes that we'd want to make as we develop our plan going forward. So that's one that we'll probably have them do some work for us, just as an example. But if there's any other suggestions, certainly we would love to hear those.
So they're going to also give us like the external factors that contribute to the general financial health of the city, and then we can plug in certain like proposed ideas that can change it in one way or another.
Yeah, so the first part of the analysis is that 10-year model and also those factors that we think are risks or potential areas that will help us over the next 10 years. So that's part of Part A of the contract.
Gotcha.
Sneed?
I'm sorry. My first question, when I lost my thought, I'm going all the way back when I say meetings that we have here and gatherings that we have here. I guess I should just phrase it as more so the gatherings, because we always say this is a public building. And I guess the question might go to the mayor's office, but the question is when we have things like the youth poetry slam, and when we have things that's related to, I don't know, like Pride we had this week, that we want everyone to come, but we don't advertise it on the calendar, and I guess that's more so what I'm looking for.
I see. I think that would be a follow-up with the mayor's office in terms of how they announce those items on the
And getting it
website
on the
or
calendar.
communication.
So that's, I guess, a question for you, Jeff, that I'll come back to.
Sure. Mr. Chair, do you want to note that as a formal request?
Please. I mean, this is a public building, so can
Sure.
we find
Yeah, no.
out how we can get that on the schedule as well, so folks know what's going on in City Hall and the building?
Okay, so request number 2 is how to get public events that are held at City Hall posted online. Got it. Any other questions, colleagues?
Yeah.
Everyone's good. Bob, Daniel, thank you very much for coming out in the community and doing those budget briefings that you did. Those were extremely helpful. I know my constituents very much appreciated it. I know you did some for, who else did they do them with? Burnett. Sneed.
Burnett and
Yeah.
Sneed, yeah.
Yeah.
And last year with Councilman Henry. So if folks have interest going forward, you can either get in touch with me. Our coordinator, her name is Mara James, is the one who puts those together. So definitely welcome to do more of those if need be.
Got it. Thank you very much. We are in recess until 10 a.m.
Thank you.
Joined by Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark from the 14th District.